Good morning and welcome to the debrief from the London Action Climate Week. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, I think we can hear you.
I think we'll just wait another few minutes maybe. Amira, so welcome from myself, Adrienne Doolan. I'm the Managing Director for the Clean Energy Business Council, and my colleague Amira Yassin, who's also online with us, and I believe Arfa Abdullah as well. So all the team from CEBC are here, and we'll get started in a few minutes. We'll wait maybe another few minutes to let some more people come in, and then we'll get started. Will we wait for all 1,000 people to come in on the webinar? Or?
I think we can give it maybe a minute and then we can start. I'm admitting everyone who's registered.
Okay, give me a nod and I'll start. Okay, I think we'll start now, so we don't want to have to keep people waiting. Who I know everybody has busy schedules. So welcome again on behalf of the CEBC team, to our this morning. We're going to dissect and have a debrief from the London Climate Action Week. So I am really privileged to have Wasim Honaini, who's the managing director of the WMSJ consultancy, and a proud CEBC board member, and his colleague Asal Al-Omeri, and to Oksana Longwinova from Olive Gaia. So guys, we'll get started. I just want to sort of set the frame for what you're going to debrief us on. So good morning to our audience. Thank you for joining us. I want to start the session by sort of talking about what actually London Climate Week, what happened there. I mean, there were conversations on finance, on green, on the revenues, on bankability. And at that same time, London's fire brigade were literally receiving hundreds of emergency calls from heat-related incidents. And the Met Office in London was issuing an extreme red alert. And this was for 3 consecutive days. So this was the first time that had happened since they started keeping these records since 2003. I believe pavements in part of London, in Holborn, had hit sort of over 57 degrees, yet not enough to fry an egg, but people like to show that. Hospitals were declaring absolute heat emergencies, and I know that over 1,000 people, died actually during that period. Obviously, it hits older and younger people, so the trains were actually stopping running some of the rails because they were buckling, and within days the science was already catching up with the numbers and telling us that this was a heat wave across Europe. And that this would have been impossible without the human-caused climate change, which our report from IPCC report in 2021 has said that we are responsible. So, What's this science is actually saying? Researchers at the World Weather Attribution found the same weather patterns. We have this now, a heat dome that is producing temperatures that's roughly 3.5 degrees Celsius warmer now than it was in records of 1976. And where half of the European cities breached dangerous indoor heat stress levels. And by the time this heat wave is just moving through the continent with a lot of deaths, and these are not going to be freak weather conditions. This is a pattern, and this is a new pattern. So the global temperatures over the last few years have been sitting right at 1.5 degrees Celsius, which are above pre-level, pre-industrial levels, and what the Paris Agreement has actually agreed on, that threshold. The scientists calling this a temporary overshoot, but the question was never really whether we'd cross it. It was how far we were going to let ourselves go past it. And now with the World Meteorological Organization confirming with this strong El Nino that's now upon us, we are going to definitely see record heat waves, flooding, and extreme weather events coming along. So this just isn't about one bad summer in London or in Europe. This is a story about a system that is already running absolutely hot, and we're just giving it constantly that extra push. Our world global emissions continue to rise year on year despite warnings from the IPC report in 2021. So just let that sink in for a moment, because, all of these conversations that we are having, they all need to be with this in mind. Why are we doing ESG reporting? Why are we doing sustainability reporting? Why do we need to decarbonize? If we don't know the scientific facts, then I can see that there's absolutely no push on this for people. So the city that was hosting the climate conversations was actually literally cooking in its own infrastructure, and this will continue to happen. Inside the conference halls, there was barely any AC. I've heard there were fans, and some hotels were not letting people in because they didn't have the facilities to keep them safe, basically. And I think, on the lips of people who are maybe not privy to the science or don't want to know the science, the word bankability just keeps coming up time and time again. So I don't want to be cynical about finance, because, I know that we need to be honest about this, but there is definitely a gap opening up despite the conversations that there, that the climate science and the climate risks are bankable, but there is a gap, and it's not just the gap that we see between London and MENA and those 5,000 kilometres, but there's a gap between the pace of science and the pace of the capital. And now, look, we've spent a decade building this argument that the climate action needs to be bankable, and we need to talk about capital, because capital moves the world. And okay, I accept this. But we have to talk about the credibility of transition plans. And what we're really racing against is a climate that is totally overheating. So we need to accelerate these conversations. So what I'd like to kind of put in everybody's minds before I hand over to the panelists is, are we in MENA? Are we at risk of doing the same thing? Are we focused on making the case so investable that we're treating the emergency itself as just sort of background noise, a little bit irritating, and not the urgency and the risk that it absolutely is? We don't, obviously the answer is not to abandon bankability. But in this region where we sit really at the sharp end of heat stress, water scarcity and excessive energy demands, and in a climate that's almost already close to, physiological limits for humans, and we all experience that now each summer. I'm 20 years in the country, and like in the last 10 years, the summers are becoming excessively hot. But the heat isn't a talking point, but the finance seems to be the main talking point. So we've kind of, I want to frame the urgency of the science, and the bankability. And I'm going to hand over to Wasim to start. And please feel free to put any questions into the chat, and we'll be absolutely delighted to have a Q&A when we're finished. So Wasim, I'm going to hand it over to you now. I'm really interested to hear your take on the London Climate Action Week. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Adrian, and the Clean Energy Business Council team for having this chat. I think you put it very well. You put all the background for what's going on. You always put the right discussion on track and bring it to the table. I'm not you when it comes to the science, to the being advocate too much on the climate, on the water, on the nature. Maybe I'm gonna look at it from the other side of it. What's really drove us to be in the current situation, which is business, and I think today businesses are aware that three of them, when I put the climate change, the water, and the nature became a business issue. It creates business disruption, it creates risks, it creates, we have seen that through the insurance cost and the labor cost and the business disruption. And now, what we're gonna move this to the right direction or reverse the current direction is the finance, is the investment. When we look at it from green activities, how are we going to finance it? So I'm delighted and honored actually to be here in this panel. I'm here with Asal. We have a couple of slides to address all the points that you put, which is very heavy topics. We'll start a little bit from the macro level, talking a little bit on the green revenue overall globally. How is this translated into green financing at different themes, different products, from addressing the transition risks, the adaptation plans, a little bit on the topic that you mentioned, which is still emerging when we talk about the water and biodiversity and nature. Lastly, we'll cover a little bit on what we have seen from the global level going down to the Middle East, talking about how is the climate change and the water element is impacting the region. I fully agree that the picture is not rosy, but it is not bad. I think it is more about having the right pillars to do the right thing. We will see what is missing today, what is the big gap that we are facing, what's the right picture, where is the wrong, what is the element that we need to focus on. So starting with that, I will hand it over to Asal to take us from the bigger picture on the green economy to the green finance, and then I will take over a little bit on the deeper dive.
Yeah, thank you, Wasim. Thank you, Adrian, and thanks for CEBC for this chance. So one of my biggest takeaways from London Climate Action Week was that sustainability conversation are evolving rapidly. So the focus is no longer on reducing emissions. It is increasingly about building resilience and directing capital towards solutions that create a long-term economic value. So over the past 10 years, green economy has grown around 20% annually, and today it's represent around 10% of the global listed equity. So what's driving this growth? It's the increasingly demand on the electrical vehicles and the renewable energy, the efficient technologies. So actually around 100 out of 130 green product and services continue to grow in 2025. So for the MENA region, these discussions are especially very important and relevant because many of these challenges are already shaping our economies today. The green economy actually is no longer a niche sector, because it has one of the biggest world's largest investment opportunities, surpassing with a $10 trillion until the quarter number 4 of 2025. So with a market capitalization that included as a third world's largest industries. So this increasing continuous growth in green revenue will lead to investors to encourage them to focus on innovation, to focus on resilience and long-term value. So this shift in this scenario will also changing with the capital flows, with growing investment, not only in clean energy, but also in nature-based solutions. So the technology and industrial, the automobile and the utilities. So it's represent around 73% of the green economy, and it's a very big percent. So this is of a total green economy market capitalization. And another important findings that the energy management and the efficiency, it's around 44% of the total also green revenue just. So it's driven by cloud computing, efficient IT, and sustainable building. So this is show that sustainability is increasingly becoming a part of a mainstream of businesses across different sectors in the world. So how this transition is being financed? So the green capital has grown rapidly over the past 10 years, recording an average annual growth rate around 72%. It's mainly driven by funds, equities, followed by sustainable bonds and green bonds. So this demonstrates the rapid expansion of sustainable finance and the increasing availability of green investment capital. So I can move the, yes.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. However, sorry, there is still an important mismatch between where capital is raised and where it is invested. More than 9% of climate finance continues to support the energy transition, while adaptation and biodiversity and water receive a much smaller share of investment. So although the climate finance utilization has grown by around 23% annually between 2020 and 2025. So these critical areas remain significantly underfunded. So this brings us an important question. So if more capital is becoming available, how can we direct more of it